Right, welcome back. Let's call this the Analyze Logon Duration Script webinar after hours. So Trent and I are still here. We are looking at some of the questions we didn't get to in the webinar, and we're just going to cover these now in this video. So Trenton, welcome back. So let me start from the top. First question is a question about AppX load packages. So somebody, Brandon here, indicates that they have that particular bit AppX load packages for more than 35 seconds. How do we bring this number down?
Yeah, so the easiest optimization opportunities are listed in the blog article for the 5 key updates to the ControlUp Analyze Logon Duration, AppX load times article. But the biggest one is enabling the policy to disable the show first run animation. So once you do that, you can save probably 7 to 10 seconds right off the bat. Beyond that, removing as many AppX packages as possible, or potentially making sure that you don't have other processes that might be running while a logon is occurring. So in one particular example, app volumes will actually attach app volumes to the logon at the same time as the AppX packages are loading, and that causes contention. And if you don't have enough virtual CPUs or CPU capacity, it delays logons. So probably the easiest way is, like I said, the policy, removing the packages, and then that's probably about as good as you can go. But within the article, I do specify other things you can try. But full disclosure, it's probably completely unsupported by Microsoft.
Okay, and you talked about the removal of AppX packages. There was actually question 16 here from A, let's call him A. Is there a good list available of AppX packages that should not be removed?
So I don't believe so. And that's because the list of AppX packages changes with every operating system. Microsoft adds more into each version of the operating system. But one thing I can say is if you use the long-term servicing channel versions of Windows 10, they actually come with a lot of AppX packages removed by default. So if you can use the long-term servicing channel versions of Windows, then you'll find that you're probably as optimized as you can be, and a lot of the AppX packages will not be present.
Okay, thank you for that. So question number 2, or I guess 3, but 2 on our list. Can you give some examples for the category logon duration other, as we can see in the real-time console and in Solve?
Yeah, so that's anything that resides outside of the phases that the ControlUp console captures. So anything outside of group policy, user policy, processing will get captured into the logon duration other. An example that's really easy to highlight is if you have printer connections or client drive map, or no, printer connections where you set your delivery group in Citrix anyways to be delayed until a printer is connected. That will be grouped into logon duration other, but will be visible within Analyze Logon Duration.
Okay. All right. Ruben asks about the script and if it can only be used within ControlUp.
No. So all of our PowerShell scripts are all community-driven solutions. What we offer as a value add is the simplicity of being able to run them. So ControlUp, with its scripting engine, has the ability to pass parameters automatically to scripts, and you can specify which one of the columns or parameters you want to specify. And so running Analyze Logon Duration within ControlUp is by far the easiest way of running it, but you can certainly run it outside of it. You just need to fill in all the proper parameters. And those parameters are listed within the script, along with examples, I believe. So it's not too difficult to run. It's just a manual process where ControlUp makes it 2 clicks.
And obviously, we also provide some level of support if it's being run out of the ControlUp console.
That's right. So if you run it from ControlUp and you have problems, whether it's error messages or warnings that you're getting when you're running the script, you can certainly reach out to our support at controlup.com, and our professional services team can help you set that up or help you with the requirements, or potentially troubleshoot gaps in time that you have within your environment.
Okay. And one follow-up question about that script. So everything in it is public. There's nothing kind of proprietary. It's all kind of like using PowerShell coding and other calls that are documented.
That's right. Yep. The script is, we're completely transparent. The script and the source code is totally available either on our GitHub or on our ControlUp Script library page, so you can review it and make sure it's operating the way that you would expect. And we're transparent about it, so absolutely, there's nothing proprietary in it.
Perfect. So Matt asks about the ALD script not showing the logon phases, specifically the metric for clicking the icon and ICA download, which I think you described as the pre-logon. Can you maybe clarify what's going on there?
Yeah, so this is one of the challenges we have, is that we can only display what we have data for. And for the pre-logon phases, especially with regards to Citrix, we're pulling that data essentially from the delivery broker. It's not actually coming from the broker, but it kind of is. It's a little bit complex. When you log in with Citrix, once you get to the server, it will store any values that are on the broker for that connection in WMI. And so we're querying the WMI to pull that information. But if it's not there because the broker hasn't supplied that information, or potentially because your client doesn't have it because it's old, it won't be present. So unfortunately, I don't know, and I don't have that answer as to why it's there sometimes and not, because Citrix is a black box. I don't have access to their source code to be able to determine that.
Okay. And then Paul asks, and I think we covered this during the webinar as well, do we track profile unity?
Yeah, so that's one of the challenges with analyze logon duration, is we're only as good as the technology that we're aware of. And being a competitor to a lot of companies, we don't have access to a lot of this software. So we rely on our customers to say, hey, we have this problem, we have this gap in time, we would like some help in analyzing it. And then we bring in our professional services, and having an environment with that technology that we can start to explore and understand. That's what gives us the ability to add those markers, the start and end markers for what a phase is, into analyze logon duration. So we don't monitor profile unity today. If you would like profile unity to be monitored, feel free to reach out to us, connect with us, and we'll set up some sessions and start looking into what we can do.
All right. So question number 6 on our list is from Daniel, and he talks about their Citrix environment running Windows 10 VDI. And, on average, it's 30 to 45 seconds login, but sometimes they see logins taking over 9 minutes or up to 9 minutes. The bottleneck seems to occur at the shell active setup. Anything you can kind of like enlighten us with on improving that?
Yeah, so I mean, lots of things can block logon. Actually, I think there was a good article about how active setup works with Helge Klein, where what you can do is you can actually create a custom active setup where it just opens Notepad, but it won't continue the logon process until you close Notepad. So I know some customers that I've worked with, they've actually used active setup to prompt to put up like a custom PowerShell script that shows a window that is a license agreement for a user that they need to accept, as opposed to using the logon banner keys that Windows has built in natively. So that would cause, a really long active setup phase if it's being delayed, waiting for some activity to complete. But in reality, how we measure the shell phase is as soon as explorer.exe starts, that's when we consider the shell phase to begin. And then once the start menu is built, we tie into Windows events, like the built-in Windows events that are only accessible through APIs. And once the start menu says, hey, I'm ready, the desktop is ready, that's when we consider it complete. So anything that happens in between there, you need to do investigation on from the start to the end phase. But that's how we track it. So if you're seeing it be 9 minutes, then potentially it's because Explorer hasn't completed until, and we haven't gotten that event until 9 minutes after. Why that could be, we need to do some troubleshooting to figure that out.
Okay. Next question is about RDS remote apps and the pre-logon phase you described. Can it be used for that?
Yeah, so the pre-logon phase for both Horizon and Citrix is because, again, we're pulling that data from some data sources that they're providing. I'm not aware of any pre-logon metrics that Microsoft might be providing. But if you think you have some ideas, feel free to reach out to me and I can do some investigation on it.
And then this is sort of a question that was answered before, but this is about, can we dig into specific login components that take extended periods of time?
Of course, right? Like it's your environment. You can, I assume you have the rights to do a lot of things within it. I'm a big proponent of using Process Monitor to track events and try to understand, what's actually going on using Process Monitor, because Process Monitor can track both the registry reads and writes, files reads and writes, and even the process stack, so you can see where individual processes are consuming a lot of their time. I did have a session with ZenUp Blog, I think about a year ago, where I actually dug into how to use Process Monitor to try to track phases that way. And I'll see if I can dig it up and send it to you.
Yeah, and what we can do is once we post this video, I'll have a look if we can add some URLs to these resources as well. When there's an update to the script, is it automatically updated in ControlUp?
So no, it's not automatically updated. It requires user intervention. So when you go to the script actions button within the ControlUp console, the script action will actually have a little update button on it, and you can click it there.
Perfect. Does this work best for new sessions and not sessions that have been disconnected and reconnected numerous times?
Correct. Yes. This analyze login duration predominantly will only work for new sessions. So any sessions that are disconnected or reconnected will fail. And the reason for that, or most likely will fail, the reason for that is because we're using APIs to track when a session was logged on, and a reconnect counts as a new logon. So when we use that timer or that time to try to find all the events that are associated with it, obviously with a reconnect, we're going to be missing a lot of data. So analyze login duration certainly works best on new sessions.
Okay, and if you're doing this against a disconnected session or a reconnected session, are there any common error messages you could see that pop up?
Well, generally, you just won't have any data, or you'll get all the warnings at the bottom of the console. If a session is disconnected, the analyze login duration will not run because required parameters aren't present, right? We require the client name so we can check to see if there's any printers being attached, and potentially some other work within that requires the client name. Obviously, the client name doesn't exist if the session is disconnected. So analyze login duration will not work for sessions that are disconnected, only sessions that are active and it's a new session.
Okay. And there was a question about this error message, missing an argument. When can that happen?
So disconnected session, for sure. Okay. 99% of the time when it tells you there's a missing argument, or the argument is system.string or something like that, it's because you're running it against a disconnected session.
Excellent. Let's see. There's a question 11 on our list about the desktop load time phase. I don't see an option to do that, or is that where ControlUp has its limits?
Yeah. So analyze login duration, the desktop load time phase in analyze login duration is the shell phase. So anything within the shell phase is what we break down. So that includes the Apex packages, the user in it, if they have an Active Directory logon script, or potentially the group policy logon script, those could all reside within the shell phase, which is directly analogous to the desktop load time phase in ControlUp.
Okay. And then the next question is about license requirements. Now, the question is particularly about VMware Horizon, but I guess we can also capture Citrix in there. Are there any specific license requirements to be able to run the ALD?
No, there are no license requirements.
Okay. Easy. There was a question about the RSOP disabling, and we'll make sure that that we'll add that to the list of URLs as well. But there's, of course, your most recent blog post on the ControlUp blog. So that would be a good starting point if you just go to controlup.com, click on, I think it's resources blog, and then I think it's one of the promoted articles that talks about this.
Yep. And within that blog article itself, just to expand on a little bit, I do provide the sources within that article for why RSOP should be disabled. And that justification, again, comes directly from Microsoft. It's older, but it's all completely still relevant.
Perfect. Let's see. Question 15 here from Chris. Can you comment why the ControlUp Logon metrics vary from what we see in Citrix Director?
Yeah. So the reason why they differ so much is we're using the native Windows metrics as much as possible. Citrix Director is actually pulling its metrics from the Citrix services that generate events. So a really good example of why they differ so much is way back in like 7.15 XenApp days. Citrix actually was using the Citrix profile service or the profile management service to create timestamps in the event log for when the desktop was ready and when this was happening, when that was happening. And so it was very inconsistent. And there was hacks even out there where you could move it into like a scheduled task, and then it would be a little more consistent and it would save you 30 seconds. But in reality, it's just generating those timestamps faster. So the reason why it varies so much is because Citrix has its own proprietary method of measuring its stuff, and we don't have visibility into that. So we are relying on tried and true and consistent Windows built-in metrics.
Okay, that's clear enough. Let's see, Thorsten asked, can you get in detail what is included in the Windows pre-shell user init phase?
Yeah, so within Windows itself, there's a registry path for the user init where it can execute some script actions, or some, not script actions, but some scripts. And usually it executes like a little batch file, and then the user init does some more activity. And you can add things into it as well if you wanted to. And I know I have in the past, and Microsoft used to have guidance on disabling scripts being run from user init. But essentially that's what it is. It's the user init that's executed from whatever processes that are there, and then we track those process start and end times, and then that's what we report back. So it's essentially anything in that user init key, the start and the end, and we report just essentially how long that process took.
Okay. The next question is 18 on our list, is can we do the same thing for Linux VDAs?
So we are relying exclusively on the Windows operating system and the Windows operating system technology. So as of today, we do not track logon details for Linux VDAs.
Is there other things you can do with ControlUp for Linux workloads?
I mean, it depends what you want to do, right? Depends what you want to track. So as with anything, because we have script actions, you can extend it to do anything. But for analyze logon duration out of the box, it does not give you details for Linux VDAs.
Right, but we do collect metrics with ControlUp. So without the ALD, so in the console and in Solve, you will be able to, see certain metrics from Linux workloads.
Yep. We can see CPU, memory, disk utilization, things like that for Linux workloads. We can also tie in with EdgeDX. I believe that it's got clients for Linux machines as well, so we can pull metrics from there.
All right, so next question is from Daniel. The ALD on our system routinely shows 6 to 7 seconds for local group policy, and it's showing as being from Citrix group policy. Would this potentially be Citrix policies configured from Studio or perhaps WAM?
Yeah, this is obviously this one requires more troubleshooting. I actually see something similar in our Acme org lab here in ControlUp. I don't have an answer. I haven't looked into it, but this might be worth looking into because this seems to be a pretty consistent issue that I see as well. This might be, again, related to the WMI. If you've got WMI filters attached, although again, local group policy shouldn't have that. So it is a mystery. I don't have an answer for you. This is something that requires investigation.
All right. Well, I guess you have another project lined up then. There's a request for, and I think I saw 2 requests about Citrix App Layering. My favorite one is the person mentioning that they're actually using Citrix App Layering for their VMware Horizon environment. Is there any plans to do something with that?
Yeah, so same answer with Profile Unity. So, a lot of our customers, if they're using Citrix App Layering, it doesn't seem to be impacting their logon time to the point that they haven't asked us to investigate, either gaps in the logon process or whatever. So if you think app layering is causing some logon delays in your environment, feel free to reach out to us at ControlUp and we can hop on a call with you and start some investigation. We do really require an environment with these technologies configured and operating in order to better understand the whole picture. Because if we set it up internally ourselves, we can only do so much. But when it's in a real production environment, in a customer use case, we can take the findings from there and we can get much more granular as to how people are actually using these technologies. And then we can look for those start and end markers. So for Citrix App Layering, if you think it's causing logon duration issues, feel free to reach out to ControlUp and we can set up a call and we can start doing some investigation.
Excellent. We're almost at the end, a few more left. The next one is about auditing of process creation is not set to at least success as required. It is set to none. So I think that is one of the messages you can see in the output. What does that mean?
Yeah, it means exactly what it says. The auditing of process creation is not set to success. It's set to none. So that means as processes are being created, they're not being recorded in the security event log. We require process start and termination, so that way we can measure how long processes run, because that gives us an idea for how long certain phases run. So if you're getting that, you probably don't have the prerequisites set up entirely. And we do have a blog article, sorry, not a blog article, a KB article that goes over how to set those up. So I would say please refer to it and make sure you don't get that message, because it's pretty critical. The analyzed logon duration will do its best to try to show you the data that it can with the information that it has available, but it's most effective when it has all information available. And process start and termination is a pretty critical one.
Yeah, and I believe there's a script in our script library, which I believe needs some updating, but there is one that can set certain prerequisites automatically.
Yep, absolutely. And when it runs, everything happens immediately, so there's no need to reboot. Once there is a prerequisite script within our ControlUp script library, you can run on a machine, and it'll configure all the settings as long as you don't have group policy overriding them. And we're just setting all those policies locally. Then they will be available, and the next logon will have data.
Okay, perfect. The next question is about the RSOP logging, about to WMI, something that is enabled by default. And I believe that is the case, but maybe you can elaborate.
Yes. So RSOP logging is enabled by default. Microsoft sets it enabled by default across all their operating systems, whether it be server or desktop OS. And it's the behavior of it. The behavior of it, the design of it was to log data to the WMI repository, which again is a double-edged sword, because the more data you store in there, the slower WMI becomes. So disable it, please.
All right. Citrix Profile Management.
Yeah. So do we track Citrix Profile Management? So yes, we do. We track how long it took the Citrix Profile Management CSE to operate. We don't break it down any further than that, mostly because there's lots of different options within Citrix Profile Management, whether it's having it operate kind of like FSLogix, where it's mounting a VHDX file, or whether it's doing the classic, streaming files from a file share or copying them all down. In order to measure those, you generally need to use Process Monitor or something like that, or potentially we just need to do further investigation as to how to track that. But if we can't find start and end markers for whatever we want to track, the best we can do is just report back the whole of the phase, and it will require something like Process Monitor to really understand what's going on.
Okay, and then the last one on the list is about the so this is actually Patrick. He mentions that they have a specific folder where scripts need to reside in. And they're asking if it's possible to change the location to that specific folder they have to use on their system.
And the answer is yes. We do have some registry keys that are built into ControlUp that can tweak the location of where the scripts will be downloaded to and then executed. So we can provide those keys for you and the registry values, so that way you can put them in your environment to specify where the scripts are going to be operating. The only caveat I have there is you might need to make sure the permissions are available for both users and the machine level when you set that key. Okay,
perfect. And I think that is all the questions we have. So I want to thank you, Trent. Was there anything else that you wanted to add because I know that we were kind of running out of time. So was there anything else you wanted to share with our audience?
Just review the articles if you can, the blog articles, the 5 that talk about these different technologies and how they can improve your logon time. RSOP is a really big one because, again, it's enabled by default. And if you have multi-session servers, it can really cause an impact to logon duration. So It's a pretty low hanging fruit to disable or set some of these optimizations up. So please review the articles and see if you can enable these optimizations in your environment to speed up your logons.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Trenton, so much. And for everybody listening, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Joel.